man walks into a clock shop and says, "Do you have a potato clock?" And the clock seller says, "No, we sell cuckoo clocks, wall clocks, carriage clocks. Never heard of a potato clock." And the man says, "Oh, that's a shame." And the clock seller says, "Well, why are you looking for a potato clock?" And the man says, "Well, I've just got a new job, which means I have to start at 9 o'clock. And my wife told me I have to get a potato clock." Welcome to the inversion. I'd like to introduce a theme that was in chapter 8 of my book, The Inversion, called the Unreal Machine number 2, Machinic Consciousness. Perhaps not many of us are familiar with the sentient world simulation. Now, part of my hypothesis about us being in a kind of mirror world, well, there's a lot of talk about this reality being a simulation. But already there is a simulation made of this world. In the opening years of the 21st century, a project in Purdue University in America, they created this huge computer system, and they actually made a mirror version, a simulation of our world inside the computer. That is, they placed a node for every man, woman, and child on the planet, which at that time perhaps around 7.5 billion. So for every quantitative person, they put in a representative node in their sentient world simulation. And then they put in a node for all major organizations, financial, commercial institutions, all the major industries. They also had a representative node. So they were creating a simulated environment. And then what they wished to do was they wished to strategize using this simulated environment. Now, this is what is publicly known. I think the experiment was publicly disclosed around 2007. However, even before that, in 2004, the US Joint Command had expressed an interest in it and were investigating it. So the operation was surely operating before it became publicly known. And it was talked about that initially it was used to support the American industries, those American companies within the Fortune 500 companies. They were given access to this simulated world for making business decisions. So they could put in a kind of event like what would happen if we invested here or if we competed for this project. And then the computer would give them a simulated response. So it gave American industry an advantage by knowing how their actions would respond or interact with other non-US industries. However, if this was public in the early 2000s, then what is not made public? I mean, we know that these supercomputers have been involved in industry for a long time. The Aladdin computerized system has been used by BlackRock, the asset investment company, since 1988. And it's now more or less monopolizing all financial flash trades because the trading is so complex and so fast that it cannot be done by human hands. So Aladdin, this hugely complex computerized system, which we could call it a kind of version of artificial intellect, is already dominant in the economic markets. But if they're making a world simulation of this world through a university and publicly talking about it, what is going on that is not public? Because we know that what is outside there in the world is also mirrored behind the veil of public knowledge in the Black project, so to speak. But I think it's interesting because even what they talk about publicly is quite telling, because a concept paper for the project Sentient World Simulation was released. And in this project paper, they actually stated that the project would be a, quote, synthetic mirror of the real world with automated continuous calibration with respect to current real world information. The Sentient World Simulation provides an environment for testing psychological operations so that military leaders can develop and test multiple courses of action to anticipate and shape behaviors of adversaries, neutrals, and partners. So it's an automated continuous calibration. What they mean is that real world data is continuously being fed into the simulation. So events going on all the time, all the data being collected from the world is put into this real world simulation. So the real world simulation is a continuous mirror world of what's happening here. But of course, every new piece of data recalibrates the simulation. Another very telling phrase, that it provides an environment for testing psychological operations. Meaning, of course, and they go on, to develop and test multiple courses of action to anticipate and shape behaviors of adversaries, neutrals, and partners. So it's not only psychological operation for adversaries, but neutrals, their own population, and partners. For shaping, i.e. nudging, which means that this real-world simulation would allow information to say, if you want this outcome, you need to nudge people or nudge an environment in this direction to shape it. So, and these supercomputers are highly, highly complex because they're dealing in petaflops, and sometimes now they just call them flops because it's gone so advanced. I just checked because the capacity of supercomputers are advancing all the time. I just checked in real time now, and the Frontier supercomputer, the Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Frontier, is currently the world's fastest exascale supercomputer based in the Oak Ridge computer facility in the United States. And that has a capacity, it has a capacity of 1.102 exaflops. So they've now gone beyond petaflops, it's exaflops. So that is 1.102 quintillion operations per second. Not trillion, not quadrillion, but quintillion operations per second. That's beyond human capacity to comprehend. Quintillion operations per second. So the calculation capacity, and that's of course the supercomputers which are publicly known about. So what this means, of course, is that there is a mirror world going on, at least in one known location, and therefore we have to assume that possibly more, which means that they are game playing the world environment. So with that capacity and resources in the hands of authorities, do you not suppose that they're going to utilize it to the best of their advantage? Which meaning, of course, if you want to know how certain events are going to play out in the world, you would put in these variables and then see through this quintillion calculation per second how these variables ripple out and affect every other node in the world. And so you can see this would be a response to that. This would nudge these other effects. Likewise, you could put in an end value saying, if I want to arrive at this goal, what variables need to be shaped and nudged to arrive at that goal? And then, of course, you'd be told how to coerce and manipulate the environment to get the end goal. So, of course, as I've discussed in the book, then what we're looking at is that this world environment is a datafied game construct to these authorities. And so there's no reason to doubt that, especially in the last few years, that if you were going to create an event, put into operation certain parameters, then you would have gameplayed this so many times. I mean, not only thousands of times or millions of times, billions of times, perhaps more, with this capacity of computer power. So you would have gameplayed this enormous iterations to work out how this would affect all these other nodes. So this is what I call part of the inversion, is that we believe that we are going through our random lives and the events across the physical world are part of these just everyday life goes on. But in fact, on the other side of this, coming from this sentient world simulation or other projects, other operations, basically a simulated parallel world exists of the earth, they are game playing everything. And so therefore human life is seen as a piece of data. And therefore the more that human beings can be programmed through propaganda, through conditioning, to be responsive to certain stimuli, we become predictable. And that's important because if human nature is predictable, then you have a more constant variable in the simulation. The more that human beings behave like robo-sapiens, mechanical people, that certain emotional stimuli, mental stimuli, we can be predicted in our behavior, then of course we are useful as a variable piece of data in the sentient simulation. Of course, one of the greatest capacities of the human being is our spontaneous, unpredictable nature. But isn't it interesting how we've been seeing less and less of this spontaneity across the world, as the way that we are polarized, the way that we are pushed into certain responses and social identities, political identities. These most likely have all been game played already. So what is the response to this inverted scenario of the real world being placed more through machinic consciousness, mechanical behavior, so therefore it mirrors more the variables in the simulation? Then the only kind of alternative to this is to develop this creative, unpredictable, spontaneous human nature. So therefore we need to break away from our variables, the programs that we're predicted to follow. Human nature has to become more organic, more perceptive, more aware. Because if we're not aware of these manageable variables, then we become just a piece of data in the construct. So the inversion, mirror worlds, data constructs, it's going on. Therefore, we need our potato clocks, because a bit of humor is always going to go against the programming. Stay well, stay healthy, stay grounded. Till next time.